closed session at 8:10 p.m. So now we'll move on. All right, now we move on to board member comments. Does any of the board directors anything to comment on?
On Tuesday, I attended the county supervisors. They presented
On to item 8, consent calendar. Any member of the board may request that items for the consent calendar be items that are remitted, act upon items remaining. I have a motion by Goodsell and a second by Proctor. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. We'll move on to item 9 for item A, information presentation by Baker Tilly on 2025 audit planning.
Hello, good evening. I'm a audit partner formerly with Moss Adams, and as of June 30th, audit principal Al Rogers. Working with, we're just here to talk through the audit plan. And I know it's been a long day, so we can keep. I'm not sure where in your packets. Just cover agenda, service team, services, have some. And then as part of the audit process, where there might give the board an opportunity. And then just wrap up with. So I introduced myself and Kyle, and then we have our concurrent Brian. So for purposes of the service, right, we are engaged to statements district for the five, separate from the drafting the financial. That really just involves taking numbers, they put it into the. We do not assist with drafting the analysis. Has to provide us, but everything else we're able. And then Carly. In terms of our statements, either during the audit process or results of the audit. And if there's anything that might or just management still has their responsibility. All the information audit. We're not necessarily specifically find some part of the audit. I'll have Kyle walk through.
that
always just been, but that was
Very much. Right, with that, we'll move on to item B, medical staff report. Recommendations from the Medical Executive Committee for medical staff membership and or clinical privilege. Other related. Dr. Alsher.
You see the Medical Executive Committees met on the 9th this month. The recommendation of and the respective clinical services and or the based on the and for and or there was appointment. Sorry, there was a recommendation for some initial appointment. Five piece of and five nation dance nation staff that meeting transfer report then inherit which 2% or patients were mainly coming from GI cardiology pediatrics. Meeting with administrative staff in June. There will be a month and they provide pharmacies with the this will be an effort to get and get back I think hardly give a financial report. Yes, there was question about the discussed. Currently, the contracts are for one facility, but when we merge, either may be district or the on-call district, meaning this contract based on the MAGA data and will need to be considered as they came up. This discussion came back mainly 6. The hope was the merging will help reduce outside by having some coverage at another hospital that came others who have going to be questioning if they are going to be their contract will be started for change on their Dr. Tariq, chairman of internal medicine, has been and asked for and he accepted serving as the chairman for 10. There was annual basis providers are required to do mask fit. EMV requires 81% of the medical staff has applied with testing by the there was the clinical services and community trust. There was no meeting for then GYN and pediatric and medicine imaging and services. Was meeting for surgeons then. Dr. Nelson said that a meeting was held, gave a description of the educational items that were discussed on their meeting. Was also a meeting for the anesthesia and pathology was held and were presented as well. Additional there was a credential and bylaws on the first page. In addition to the bylaws and the medical staff were agreed that Dr. Crab speak with ECRMC starts to develop a set of bylaws here and present both campus medical staff of the MEC an ad hoc scheme as there is bylaws at ECRMC, there is bylaws at Pioneers. This is merged together. There has to be one was arranging this. The teams can come up with bylaws that MSQ and Dr. Su had information just at is at above was in any utilization management current and this on a recommendation the Imperial Valley Healthcare District Board of Director of each of the recommendation of the meeting of MEC the staff membership and the clinic is funded above this is and the procedure and advised by the chief executive sign their comment that
you have a motion? I have a motion by Goodsell, second by Valdez. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Carries. Move on to item D, discussion of the possible action to approve resolution 2025-0626, a resolution of the Imperial Valley Board of Directors of asset transfer agreement by and among City of El Centro Regional Medical Center, and Imperial Valley Healthcare District.
So just to introduce myself, my name is Josh Schneiderman. I'm a corporate and work medical center. Negotiate the term. Hire. So just as a recap of how we got here, in 18 June of 2020, already signed a non-binding RMC city back to the acquisition. They didn't lay out the specific. So the negotiations happened and a definitive clarifying term sheet entered into. And then that were outlined since March 5 through May. States have been negotiating in good faith. Cities count have at the first draft number of back and forth. I've got what we think very comprehensive beneficial document. To go over so focusing first on the economics of the transaction, IVHD related to acquire all of the assets, also acquire by the city fully pertain. The assets that are price for that acquisition is city has agreed at the make a $5 million capital purpose. That $5 million must there is going to be a requirement that and that specified payables effectively is also a requirement effectively all the parties line of credit operation theoretically that line of credit at closing balance be of cash that will be available fund operate dollar contribution city so I want to address some of the risks. So ordinarily when we negotiate acquisition involve two private parties, really a buy done a seller takes certain state things like knowledge their seller. We've operated in cause and buyer will have assumption that none of those life if one of those that a seller may that to not be accurate. A traditional transaction, buyer would have claim against seller and say, hey, you made these got hit with a penalty, but got to pay a fine. So and say, this transaction is dynamic, does it? This transaction is unique. Got AB 918. Happen, and the purchase price is like there's a large sum of seller. We do have where we started, much more robust. Not quite as robust. Action between. Again, we don't have any of those reps and more cover that post-close. That doesn't mean that they provide us with a base conditions that exist useful as a due diligence of IVHD. Nature of the assets that liability. You'd want to draw. So to highlight that further, it's going to be fairly limited recourse at IVHD. I think it's important to recognize when I say ECR, all the assets of so ECRMC, the legal entity on a so when I talk about limited no entity gotten the benefit of doing some extent with the nature. Any of those turn out to be wrong on a post. We will have an obligation if some liability does come up and some a claim hospital against what is left of city and financially not have a reset dollars here. Not doing that at the time, but once we there is unlike in a traditional private party operating business, a buyer might pay $10 to a company, might set aside some money, fund to serve money to draw from under the and once we comes up with respect to the operating liability that responsibility. Cash that is balance sheet acting the city in addition to general hospital. There was some discussion policy to cover some of this that would have added an additional party action. City. So I highlighted a lot of these previously, but again, emphasize some of the but there is an really sizable at the moment, owned by satisfied assets. A sufficient amount to satisfy. If, for instance, Medicaid medical center was legal, node some of the liabilities, any future litigation, matters related. So, assuming all three parties, ATA will be in a sign action, the expectation is that there will be a time that we close. The number of things that will happen. Number one thing. That's the thing that's probably contracts that are going to one of the closing all of the lenders them their consent so that will have prior to closing, and we do not have an obligation action. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the cash needs to be a new during the line of credit, the $15 line of credit, and then conditions that if certain things happen, that would adverse effect. That standard is talking a life. If something like that came up, so there are fairly limited outs, but with respect to things threatened lawsuit, that is not a basis that were to happen between signing and closing to satisfy. We have taken a number of measures I will note that process is number of documents and that is ongoing process. We will be procuring a title policy covenant condition. So things really got out of hand with cash position dollars and payable dollars or some high number that things have fun. So that's one of the risk mitigation measures. The city is going to cooperate with us. And over the past couple months, there has been extensive cooperation. The operation IVHD at given us a good deal of in our hands about the nature of the operations, the nature. So on a fairly routine operating part, been able to conduct some due diligence. In terms of the timeline to closing, so confirmation, secure. That includes HD hiring all of the transition process. I mean, that the gap in time in that will happen. Probably looking. So there are a couple things that and I will highlight in that the fact in terms of the nature of the consent that we're looking for, consent on the draft APA, but there are some things that still need to happen before items that have come up in the last few days. I anticipate substantive. So we'd be looking minor changes to the document, none of which I will note one of them has already come up at, circulated in the last few days. We this received related to it. IRS was seeking payment, or at least tax liability. As we've dug into that a little bit more, it looked like that probably is the IRS, but a filed. So looks like is that there should have been made. So we've negotiated last 24. Have a closing. Sure that the maximum IVHD that's a sort of change that we've used non-substantive. Given that we've on the side. That's the first requested, and then one other item that I previously explained is requirement acquisition of it where the dollar value of the asset acquired exceeds that by that those transactions could implicate that dollar threshold at 100. Acquisition involves the acquisition of assets and dollars. There's a filing that needs under what's known. That dollar threshold is established irrespective of life. All you look at is being acquired. However, there are a number of exemptions or that implicate the way that dollar. So you'll recall when we agreed on the decided to move forward, finalize CRMC, but the irrespective of the that's also that report also indicates value of real estate that's being city at approximately. We can't. One of the exceptions that don't have to consider the value from the city. We only have to consider assets that are real estate. Most of the real estate makes up most of the value of the real estate. So that valuation report highly suggests falls below the threshold. However, we can't rely at the value of the asset acquiring from CRMC has this and
as the matter was presented in the agenda, it's presented through resolution number 2025-0626. And I've changed the numbering on the resolutions because initially we were just doing chronological 2025-1, 2025-2, and then it's hard to remember what number we're at. And so I started just using date, right? Like, when did we do it in June? Oh, in 0626, that's the date that we adopted this resolution, so that it's easier to identify. And it's presented in the agenda as Resolution 25-026, a the Imperial Valley District Directors approving the asset transfer agreement by and among the City of El Centro, Central Regional Medical Center, and Imperial Valley Healthcare District. I won't read through the text of the resolution, but I will note, as Josh mentioned, that in Section 3, I'm permitted, or the board is designating me as the authorized representative to make non-substantive correction revisions as appropriate, as may be required, meaning non-substantive or minor changes or additions or revisions can be made post-approval to the actual version of ATA that's signed. If there is proposed to be a substantive revision before signing, we would bring it back for ratification or approval. We don't anticipate any. My request is to marry the recommendation that Josh had on the screen previously with respect to the, can you go to, with respect to the Hart-Scott-Rodino Antitrust Act. I would add that paragraph as a determination in the resolution to make sure it's in there and easily presented to the DOJ if they ask for it. So that would be new Section 3 and then Section 3 and I want to make that request or change to the resolution. And the motion proposed staff recommendation is to approve resolution -0. Happy to answer any questions that the board.
Second. Motion by Goodsell, second by Garcia. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? Resolution.
Yeah, so it's going to say in the resolution, for Hart-Scott-Rodino purposes, the value of the assets being acquired is less than 126. That's all you have to say. You don't have to say what you think it is. You just have to determine and confirm less than that. That's what the resolution is.
So all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Any? Item E, discussion and possible action to reject all proposals and respond to RFP for master planning services with Anna.
Yes, that's my item. So in the agenda packet is a draft of the RFP that we put out on May 21st. I've also included proposals, the two proposals that were timely received. You'll note that Section 8 of the RFP gives the districts the right to reject any or all proposals, waive formalities, and we reserve the right to negotiate modifications directly with that as may be required to best serve the industry. If you look at the two proposals we received, one I believe is non-responsive. It proposes, I think, $5 million over 5 years, and it's not. I think the person may be misunderstood. The second what we received from Hickey Associates and Hickey was sincere, but the experience from this firm is in the K-12 and college space. It is not, they didn't have any hospital experience. As a result, I spoke with Chris and I directly solicited some of the proposers that we put on our solicitation list that didn't submit proposals. And One of them was a recommendation from Pablo from a firm called PMA, Project Management Associates. And another was from another firm called Fong and Chan, and another one from a firm called HOK. And those folks told me, must have gone to spam, must have fallen through the cracks. I'm so sorry, I'm very interested in proposing. And since then, we've gotten 2 proposals, one from Fong and Chan and one from PMA, that look very promising. Gosh, that look stellar, very promising, and exactly the type of consultation, like of consultant that we need with the team that we need behind them. So my request for today, as presented in the agenda, to reject all proposals timely received by the RFP and direct me and Josh, and once July 1 hits, IVHD, to negotiate directly with these firms that have submitted proposals. What I foresee is we have a good look at their proposals, maybe interview them or talk to them, have a chat with them on the phone to make sure we like their team. Have a look at the budgets and the costs, right? The hourly rates that their folks work at, and then come back to the July 10 meeting with a proposal contract with one. And we'll tell you, why we selected recommendation, that consultant in particular. But I want to give, because we just got one today and we just got one last Friday. So I want to give Chris and Pablo a real opportunity to look at these, read them, chew through them, talk to the guys, and figure out who's the best suited for this work. Really important. And as much as I appreciate the Hickey and Associates proposal, we cannot be anyone's guinea pig. We need someone that's done this kind of stuff before, for seismic, for hospitals, California. And so we really need to make sure it's the right folks that we bring on board. So the recommendation, because our RFP does say that it did contemplate award of a contract today, but my recommendation is to reject all bids and direct staff to negotiate directly with the firm and bring back for approval a contract at the July 10 board meeting. I'm happy to answer any
Questions?
Make a motion to reject the current proposals that have been made. And Adriana, to the board.
I have a motion by Garcia and a second by Proctor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Move on to item F, approval of second amendment to standard industrial/commercial tenant lease with Tyson Medical Inc.
Yes, I'll take that item too. The amendment is approved in the agenda packet. We have to attach the exhibits. But the amendment, I'm happy to answer any questions about it. It is a amendment that clarifies our obligations with Mr. Tyson, who has had access to the north side of the building, but not the south side. This follows the rent abatement, which is the subject of the amendment. Whereby the Heffernan Board agreed, and we agreed to honor a 5-month rent abatement for the urgent care facility. The 5 months is up next month, but he's only had access to the north side. So we're clarifying in the second amendment that because he only got access to the south side earlier this month, his 5-month rent abatement for the south side starts when it became available to him. And so the rent portion that's going to be due starting next month is only the portion of the building that access. There's a couple other cleanup items included in the amendment. This amendment has already been agreed to by Mr. Tyson, and it's presented to this board.
Any questions? Not all understand a motion? Second?
I second.
I have a motion by Proctor and a second by Valdez. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. We'll move on to item G, authorize approval of policy.
Sure, I'll take that one too. This was a request that came from both Chris and Frank, our consultant. They want to increase the district's presence on social media and create social media. And in order to do so, our recommendation was to have a policy first so that there is our clear boundaries and guidelines on how to run social that are district control. So the version of the social media policy agenda packet, and I'm happy to answer.
Have any questions or? Have a second? I have a motion by Garcia and a second by Proctor. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Carries. We'll move on to item H, authorize the execution of the Joint Powers Authority Agreement, the application for certificate of consent to self-insure as public agency employer, self-insure, and the resolution date such application.
Hilarious.
I'll do my own research. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so this is a small item that for a board to authorize the execution of the Joint Powers Authority Agreement, to apply for a certificate of consent on self-insurance as public agency for Imperial Valley Healthcare District that Beta or workers' comp insurance carrier should have included when the whole packet was approved by the board recently. They didn't, they just emailed us recently, last week to be exact. Hey, since the new district is having new tax number ID, we need to replace the existing certificate for new, basically a certificate that looks like this. So that's needs to be, this needs to be signed by CEO. Yeah, just make it, add it to approve.
Yeah, and Beta is there. They are a JPA. It's a self-insurance pool. PMH had been a member, and this is pretty standard. You just have to become a member of technically the Joint Powers Authority agreement in order to pay self-insurance pool. So the resolution, it might look funny, but that's just because it's their standard resolution that you just kind of have to fill out, like basically an application.
Do you have any questions? And I'll entertain a motion. Do you have a second?
I second.
I have a motion by Goodsell and a second by Garcia. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Now I'll move on to item I, Resolution 2025-02 of the Imperial Valley Healthcare District Board of Directors authorizing execution and delivery of the application to the Directors of Industrial Relations, State of California for a certificate of consent to self-insure workers' liabilities, also with
Same
Mr.
exact
Fountain.
It's from the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not separate.
Perfect.
You could actually have, I should have said something. You could have taken H and I together in the motion and vote, but since one is a resolution and the other one is execution of the agreement, it's appropriate to do them separately, but it's the exact same thing. It's just the resolution authorizing the agreement.
Perfect. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion. Authorize or approve the resolution 2025-02 for the Imperial Valley Healthcare District Board of execution and delivery of the application to the Directors of Industrial Relations, State of California, and self-insured station liability.
A motion by Garcia and second by Proctor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. And I just want to thank you, Mr. Valdez,
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank
for hanging with us. I know it was late and you're putting up for Carly, but we appreciate it.
No, no.
Congratulations on finding a new family member, but thank you.
I would say, and for the records, Carly's son's team did win. So
That's good.
14-3. So, yes. So, all right, we'll move on to item J, discussion and direction regarding IVHD bylaws revision and creation of standing committees. I'll take this item. So mostly we wanted to go through and we really need to work on these committees. So I was gonna say, like, let's get the process started. So maybe we'll talk, if we we can, start directing our bylaws to kind of marry the two bylaws of PMH and IVHD, because right now we just have it, if they conflict, IVHD's, does it, and so we can start that process. And then in there, it contemplates some committees, so we can put the standing committees in the bylaws, and then, Adriana will go through the process, we talk about, which committees we want, and then for our next, board agenda, we'll have appointments to committees.
So you'll recall that the IVHD bylaws had a lot of like hold kind of sections because we didn't have an address yet, because we didn't have Heffernan yet, we didn't have like anything to run. So of course, no committees made sense. And then when we adopted the resolution at the beginning of the year to accept and adopt all of PMH's policies and bylaws as our own, we did that, except we said to the extent IVHD adopted stuff conflicts, our stuff will control, but otherwise their stuff is the secondary or primary if there's no conflict. So we technically have two sets of bylaws right now. And if one is silent, the other controls. If there's a conflict, the IVHD ones control. So it really just is a matter of like, we need one working set of bylaws that this board can adopt and say expressly that it supersedes PMH one and it supersedes our prior bylaws. And then while we're at it, it also sort of makes sense to do this in the context of coordinating with ECRMC to make sure the ECRMC bylaws are, everything makes sense for the board bylaws. And so in having the conversation about committees, because I know this group has started talking about, well, it might be a benefit to have, for example, a finance committee to do the deep dive that you may want to do with Carly in a separate setting. And then usually the way something like a finance committee would work is they go through the nitty gritty budget stuff, and then they come back with a recommendation to approve the financials. And then you would do your own look at the financials, but you would have that comfort of, well, the finance committee has looked at the financials and they're recommending approval. And so that's a way of streamlining these meetings so that you're not taking so long on items and you're letting your committees do a lot of the hard work for you. So our IVHD bylaws contemplate, for example, standing committees, which would be a finance, operation and planning committee, a governance and ledge committee, which the governance and ledge committee could probably take over some of the functions of the current ad hoc outreach and negotiation committee, and an audit, compliance and ethics committee. There are other committees that you could form that would be board committees. Those committees would have to comply with the Brown Act. So it'd be a separate Brown Act meeting, separate compensable meeting for the board. You'd have to make them publicly available. But again, those would have sort of decision-making authority that you could delegate to them and define what their job is, and then bring it back to the board for board meeting approval. The PMH bylaws, which are also attached to the agenda packet, they don't contemplate any specific committees. And then the way that the committees are appointed are different between the two. So IVHD's bylaws say that the chair makes or the president makes recommendations and the board picks who's on what committee. You appoint them. The PMH bylaw says that the board chair or the president just appoints the committees. So, it's worth a conversation at some point for this board. What do you want? Do you want it to be this way or do you want it to be that way? What kind of committees do you want? And so as I talked to Katie about it, it's like, let's just start the conversation so that you can give us some direction, because what we would do as legal counsel is create a married version of the document that we could bring back to this board for review, consideration, approval, or if you don't like it, revision. And then the other thought is you could create an ad hoc or like a bylaws committee, an ad hoc that would be solely for the purposes of creating new bylaws and then bringing them back for recommendation and approval, because that fits the function of an ad hoc, which is like limited purpose, irregular meetings, less than a quorum of the board. You could do something like that. So just throwing it out, you can also just like appoint one person. Hey, you coordinate with Adriana on the bylaws. You could do it any number of ways, but I do think it's probably prudent to start creating that bylaws document.
Do we want to have you like kind of take us first stab at it, and at our next meeting we'll have it, we'll have ad hocs and we'll have a bylaws one on there, and we'll kind of just work through that way, or do you want to do one now? Or can we use the negotiations one as it for now?
Well, I
Or
do
that's
recall when we appointed one of the ad hocs, you don't have to, you could appoint through an item, but we might want to put an item on the July 10th, since it's only 2 weeks away, agenda, appointment of bylaws ad hoc.
Okay.
So that the board members know, because I know we don't have 2 board members here. But maybe they want to be on it, or maybe they don't want to have a say in it. So maybe we appoint an ad hoc then.
Okay.
But I think something that, because it's going to take time to create a new document, something you could give me some direction on now is, how do you want to appoint your committees? So that the way that I have it in the IVHD bylaws is the board appoints. Some folks like that, some folks don't, right? So how would you, as you sit here, and you could just we'll think about it and give you direction at the July 10 meeting, tell you offline, whatever, or you can give me direction now.
I personally, when I read both of them, that stood out to me.
Yeah.
And I like the way we do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
like
my
it.
recommendation too.
But I think in ours, it says our president can still recommend, but it's board approved.
Yeah,
Okay.
it says the chairman may nominate and then a majority of the board may appoint. So the board does the appointment.
Yeah.
And folks can also self-nominate. There's nothing.
Yeah.
And at this time,
required.
should we get a copy of El Centro's just so we can see if there's
Yeah.
anything that we should?
Perfect.
Yes, I
'Cause we
think
might
that's a
even get
good
some
idea.
ideas out of it.
Yeah. And I think there's also value to, that's why I do think something like an ad hoc or even like a bylaws workshop, if the whole board wants to be involved, have the IVHD ones, have the PMH ones, have the ECRMC ones. Look at them. What does it say? Okay, we like this. And I could just circle, we like this. We like to create like a Frankenstein document, but then refine it to make sure it all looks the same. We could do a workshop. There's a bunch of ideas on how we could do that.
I'd like a workshop. At the writers at board.
But these are for our board.
This is
This is the board.
Yeah,
This is
the
not,
med
not the
bylaws.
med. This is just the board. I think it's better to do it, in an ad hoc and then approve it. This is like, I don't think anybody quite grasps how important bylaws are, and how we set them now will dictate how stuff runs forever. And if there's ever future conflicts, you point to the bylaws and you point ways to make changes to the bylaws, you point all of that. So, I would say I personally have read like every health bylaws looking at what we want, so I think it's just they're that important, so. But yeah, so
So the benefit of an ad hoc is you've got flexibility to meet over Zoom, to meet as often as you need to or want to, last minute stuff. Can you talk tomorrow? What do you think about this language? It gives you more flexibility to do that. The benefit of a workshop is all of you are here. The downside of a workshop, you got to publicly notice it, it's a public meeting, agenda packet, all of that. So we could do both. We could do either.
why don't we put an ad hoc together at the next board meeting, make sure everybody's here. We'll have, once we get close, have a workshop,
Right.
review them,
Good
go
idea.
through it. Anybody wants to make changes, you know what I mean? Do it
Yeah.
that route. Like number one, it's summer, everybody's going on vacation.
Yeah.
Hence we have 2 on vacation right now.
Yeah.
Like, let's not make this more
Yeah,
complicated.
there really is value to being
I
able to
think-
Zoom meet and not.
Yeah, and then if everybody can send their recommendations to Adriana of what, committees they think they should be, and we'll bring them back to them.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Send me offline your thoughts on which committees you want to set up in the immediate.
Adrian, I remember in the past, you had given us definitions of the committees. You send that to us?
Yes. I will do that. And then we'll bring back this item to the July 10 meeting for action, because this was just like the conversation starter, discussion and direction. Okay, great.
Awesome.
Okay,
And
and
then-
direction.
Any management reports? Nobody has any management, correct? Awesome. If that, I'm gonna adjourn this meeting at 9:20 PM.
Oh, wait, there's other items on the agenda. You want to just
Where?
clarify that we're not. Like
Management,
the report?
there's none.
Oh, yeah, okay, did you say that? Sorry, I didn't.
Everybody's tired.
Yes.
There is none. We just went over future agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. There was no reportable action taken during closed session.
Oh, good
Forgot to
job.
say that. And there was no reportable action taken. Thank you.
Go, Brenda.
Thank you, Brenda.
All right. Now we can adjourn at 9:21 PM. And Pablo, you're one step closer. We're one step- We're one step closer to getting this deal done.
This is exciting. This is wonderful.
You want to end the meeting on the?
On the Zoom?
Yeah.
There's only one person who is hanging in there with us. I know.